Hey everybody, welcome back to the wrong end of the snake question and answer period. Miles Kennedy has agreed to spend an additional 30 minutes with us, and we were just bombarded with questions during it, and so we want to try to get to as many as we can. Tater, why don't you start us off with one of them?
All right, let's thank his wife Selena too for letting him hang out in the room with us for an hour of his precious time at home. So we'll thank her too. But I kind of want to start where we left off. We were talking about the SE Miles Kennedy signature microphone, which I'm sure is available online. Just type in Miles Kennedy SE microphone if you want to purchase it, and you'll pop up at a zillion places, right? So there's no one place to get it. How did the relationship come? How did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did it get set up? Why did you want to do it? All that kind of stuff.
It's interesting because I had used I kept going back to the same microphone really for the last 30 years, the tried and true, and it's a great microphone. But as you know, working with me, I'm not the loudest singer. So there's always problem with bleed, right? Especially with cymbals and loud guitar players, and it would just cut through, and I was always having to push so much harder.
Yeah.
And long story short, I was on tour with Alter Bridge, and Patty, our monitor engineer, I think it was kind of a combination of Patty and Joey, our front of house guy. We're like, let's try this SE mic. Let's give this, just see what happens. And I'm at this point, I'm the guy who's like, use the same mic. You're not going to get me to switch, kid. I'm going to use the same mic.
Try it out of my hands. Yeah.
I'm going to pry it out of my dead hand. And so I went in and we did sound check, and I'm like, there's a new mic there. Okay, well, I'm just going to give it a try and see what happens. And the minute I started singing, I was like, well, first of all, it was like, it was right there. You know, that thing, I could hear my mask. I could hear all the frequencies were there. And as you also know, my voice is tricky because I have a lot of about 1K right in there. There's that weird thing that it does that a lot of mics don't like. And this was not the problem with this. It was all nice and balanced. And then when the band kicked in, that's when I was like, whoa, because is it called rejection? It's like rejection. So it's got great rejection where it keeps everything around me from bleeding into it. And so I started using it that night, and I was like, wow, it was really easy to sing that night. And then I used it the next night, and I was like, and it's just like my voice does not feel nearly as fatigued as it usually does by night too. So I just fell in love with it. And so Patty, I can't remember if he went to them or if he had a relationship with the guys at SE. And so we ended up meeting and discussing how much I loved the mic and then it was brought up, well, how about a signature mic? And I was like, really?
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, cool.
Really? So I was just honored, and it's great to attach your brand to something that you believe in 110%. It's not, a lot of times in the world we live in, people are like, oh yeah, well I use so and so, and they're, it's all for. Sometimes you wonder how sincere it is, and with me, I'm extremely passionate about this microphone because that's
awesome.
Legit. Yeah.
That's
I'm just curious, are you still singing on stage right, or did you go back to the center?
I have, but with Alter Bridge, I still have stage right, but I also have the center that I'll go to. I kind of bounce back and forth. Yeah, and as you know, a lot of that was because back in those days, Mark used to be a lot louder.
He used to be a lot louder, yeah. Yes, because I remember. I mean, we were actually the ones that were like, "Hey, Miles, let's put you over here," and of course, it was like. That's a huge ask, right? Like moving the lead singer from the center of the stage over to the right. And not only that, but putting you in front of Brian, and all that stuff. It was a thing, but I was just curious if you're still doing it. That's great.
Still doing it. And but guess who's on in-ears now? Mark.
Oh, no, really?
Mark uses in-ears now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so he can, and Slash. Yeah. So that brought the stage volume down considerably, and it's made my life a lot easier. I watch old footage of that sometimes will come up in your feed from 10 years ago when it was just an assault on stage, stage left over there, and it just because it was so loud and it was so hard for me to get over the top of it. And I was just, but now it's wonderful.
That's fantastic.
I love technology.
Well, we moved you too because Cymbal Bleed, Flip plays he's such a basher, we were like, oh man, I'm getting, so many cymbals in your stuff.
Right.
But, yeah, that's awesome, dude. Way to go.
So
let's see.
I got some more questions here. I wanted to take it
ahead.
back years. True, you were a guitar instructor.
Mm-hmm.
You were.
Yes,
Did you work out of a music store or something like that? Like we used to go to the music store and you were the guy there and you'd take guitar lessons from you, right?
Yeah. That was my gig for years and years. On top of performing live at night, I would teach during the day. I started there was a place here in Spokane called Learn to Burn, which it's still Roy's still running it. It's still around.
Awesome.
And so I would teach there from about, I think it was about 2 p.m. till about 5. And I go home and eat, and then I go play, 4 hours a night.
Yeah, you never had any formal teachings, right?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I studied guitar. I went to school. After high school, I got my Associate of Applied Science degree in commercial music jazz studies. So not only did I learn kind of the basics of even
harmony, ear training,
things like that. But I learned how to arrange for a big band. I was pretty. I guess I was pretty trained, and so I did my best to bestow some of that knowledge onto students.
That's awesome.
Interesting. Now, did any of your students have any success in the instrument?
That's a great question. I know some of them went on to play bands. I had a few that had some great songs that they wrote. But as far as going on to do it on like a national level, I don't, not that I know of, but there certainly were a fair amount that went on to teach here in town and play in bands here in town and continue to keep they've been passed that information on to the next batch. So that's
fantastic.
Felipe asks, how important is it for a musician? Do you feel like they need to move to LA or Nashville to make it?
Great question.
That's a great question.
Wow, Felipe, nice one.
Yeah. I mean, I think it helps. But here's the problem. You move to Nashville and there are tons of you there and you gotta cut through all of that noise.
How do you make yourself be bigger? How do you make yourself be
more? It's tough.
It's hard.
That it is tough, but like we keep talking about, it's the idea that you've got to put in that 10,000 hours. You have to spend, so many people spend, I think the mistake a lot of young artists make is they spend so much time networking and, making, doing the business part of it, which is crucial, but trying to balance that with building your craft and building your understanding and your songwriting chops and your vocal chops, your guitar chops, or whatever it is, you don't want that to fall by the wayside. One thing I will say that was a very important meeting for me when I'd finished school and got my Associate of Applied degree, a science degree, and I'd gotten my first real gig, and it was a great gig. I was playing at this really great club here in town back when live, they still had that sort of thing here before karaoke came and killed it all. So I was playing 4 hours a night with really great players. It was awesome. And during one of the breaks, a friend came in from a friend of the bass player who was older than us and very established in the jazz scene. And he was this sax player who'd come to visit Clipper, who had studied at Berklee. And I was like, that was my goal. I wanted to go to Berklee after a while. And he said something that really stuck with me. And it was like, you're getting the best education you can get right now by just playing. And that really stuck with me. So from that point forward, I was just gigging as much as I possibly could. Because it's different. There's a difference between sitting in your room or in a study environment. You got to apply it. You got to be in the trenches, and because it's a whole different animal. So that would be one thing that could be a positive if you were to move to more of a entertainment capital is if there's plenty of places to play and audiences and whatnot. If you live somewhere, like, for example, if I lived where I live now in Spokane, it would be different because it doesn't seem like there's as much live music as there was when I was coming up the ranks. But you got to apply that stuff. You got to be out there just building your chops.
I think you increase your odds, right? Like it's difficult because now you're going to a swimming pool with a lot more sharks in it. But if you are able to have that moment of being in the right place at the right time, that you're putting yourself there as opposed to staying in Spokane and being a big fish in a really small pond. So I don't know. I encourage people to give that a shot. But man, I don't know. It's hard. It's like, like you said, it's the 1% of the 1% that end up getting
it's tough.
Yeah.
And another thing I think that's missed now, and I could be wrong. Maybe people don't take creed in this anymore, but when we were going through the club scene and all that stuff, bands put, like you say, 10,000 hours, thousands of hours into the crafts, 5-7 nights a week, multiple sets, playing as a band, playing together. Now it just seems like they one guy does it at home, the other guy does it at home. They throw the tracks together and try to shop it. People forget the importance of that band meshing and the tightness and learning how to play with each other. I think a lot of that part of the art is lost. I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
No, you're dead on. I totally agree. I think technology has been great because you can allow you to, send files back and forth and all that. But yeah, there's something about being in a room, there's something about playing music live with human beings that you just can't replicate.
Yeah, I think they've been trying for the last 12 months and they can't figure it out yet. A lot of smart people are working on it and they haven't figured it out yet. So you can't replicate it. Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Right. It's very true.
Let's see. Annalisa from Italy, of all places, says that as a beginning singer, she's a singer, she has found that self-doubt is really hard, and wonder if you can give her any tips since you were talking about it earlier.
Yeah, that was a big one for me too. I had massive stage fright, read book after book trying to figure that one out. Look, it's a lot of it is your brain is a computer. And so if you continue to reinforce fear, if you continue to say, I'm afraid of getting stage, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up, I'm afraid. Well, it's kind of like driving. The first thing they tell you when you go to driving school is hands 10 and 2 on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And where your line of sight is where you're going to go. So if you're staring into the ditch, you're going to go into the ditch. And it's the same thing with this. If you continue to tell yourself, program these negative thoughts, that's where you're going to go. And so for me, through years and years and years of everything from Tony Robbins tapes and CDs to reading book after book, I wanted to get a handle on that stage fright and that self-doubt. And what I've learned is that it essentially whatever you have running through your brain, that's where you're going to go. So change that. It's
the narrative. Yeah.
Change the narrative. I know it seems silly, but remember the Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
Sit in the mirror and be like, what did he say? And damn it, people like me and all that stuff.
Damn it, I'm good and people like me. Yeah. I forget what he said, but yeah.
Exactly. I mean, little things like that, though they seem crazy, just do it when no one's around. You got to reprogram it. You got to reprogram the narrative.
Yeah,
that's some good life advice, not just frontman advice, right? Or
totally.
Singer's advice. That's just good life advice. Yeah, fantastic. I like that. I'm going to use that.
I am too. Ziad. I don't know where you're from, Ziad, but great name. What's your favorite acoustic guitar to play?
Wow.
Good question. Well, I think I have a few that I'm very fond of. I have a 1945 Martin 00021, I believe.
Wow.
It's the rosewood body, and it's just, it records really well. It's I used it a lot on Year of the Tiger. But I also have one that's really amazing. I forgot about that one. That was the centerpiece of a lot of Year of the Tiger, was a 1944 Gibson J45 Banner. Now, what that means is the Banner years were built by the ladies here in the U.S. when all the men were off at war.
Right.
So the women were building these great guitars, and they're just something about them. They just sound, oh geez, it's just a cannon fire. That's a great one.
It's one of the hardest things for us as sound people live to get an acoustic to sound good. Because we can't put a mic in front of a great acoustic sounding guitar. We end up using pickups and, whatever. Is there one of those that's your favorite that sounds really great live?
Well, I use the Gibson. I have a few Gibson Southern Jumbos. They're like a 1959, I don't want to say copy, but they were basically emulating the 1959 Southern Jumbo. And then I put the LR Bags pickup in there.
Cool.
And I really like the LR Bags stuff. Yeah, because it has that switch where you can, it's got a little built-in microphone, or you can use the pickup. So you can kind of blend the two, and then you can, mess with the polarity within there. And it's a great little pickup.
Speaking of that subject, I recall we did a show with Slash, maybe at Guitar Center.
Yeah.
And boy, he wouldn't use an acoustic that had a pickup, we had to put a mic in front of it, and it was tough. I remember that.
Yeah. I just don't like the sound of that direct, but that's why I like this LR Bags pickup, because you can. It's got the character, especially when you roll it off to where it's using the little internal pickup. It's like, that sounds not pickup, but little internal microphone. You're like, that's got those sonic hallmarks.
How much time do you spend on your sound? So many people I see so many people show up, especially like in pop bands, where a guitar player shows up, amazing player, but his sound is like just garbage. Like, dude, really? Like, you spent all these years learning how to play so killer, but your sound is horrible. Like, is that part of your practice schedule, is like working on tone as well?
Not as much. There was a period, when I first started getting into music, and I started working in a music store, and I basically, all my entire paycheck would buy whatever the latest, greatest amp was.
Right.
If it cost whatever that was the employee. But as the years have gone on, I've kind of found what works in each band. Diesel is definitely what works in Alter Bridge, so I don't have to mess with the sound much there, which is nice. It's a little different with the solo thing. That one's that I try to integrate. There's certain diesel amps that can work in that area, but there are other sounds that I'm hearing in my head that are more old school. And so for me, I kind of go way back to, like, on this last on this Ides of March record. So much of it was a 1958 Fender Deluxe. It worked for Billy Gibbons.
It's right.
Little amp that just packs a punch.
Cool.
Hey, let me ask a question. Does Delta Airlines ever call you and say, "Where the hell are you at"?
I know, they're like, "What? You haven't added to your frequent flyer miles."
They're like, "Where have you been?
Where have you been?" I don't know how, in the roadie community, we'll call it the roadie community. Guys that work for vendors or have a lot of bands they're juggling. We just go bam, one ends, man. You're home a day, you're on to another one. But you're really the only musician that I know that works like a crew guy. I mean, you go from Slash to Alter Bridge and back, juggling those bands, and obviously you have a little bit of control over that. And then if that's not enough, when those are done, you're doing a solo thing, and you're doing a one-man show here and there and flying around doing that. Man, that is just a working musician right there. And why is that? Do you not want to take a break there for a minute? I mean, you just love it. And I guess I'm going to add on to that question is, how is, from going from those extreme traveling like you do, how is it, what's work being home now? Because we all know you got to relearn everything being home this long?
Actually, the last year has been really healthy for me. I think powering down has reminded me of how important relationships are. Just waking up in the same bed every day, eating healthy, just getting in a routine. Yeah. So that's been really cool. Yeah, as far as my work ethic and how much, especially in the last 11 years or so, how intense the touring schedule was. There were times where it was brutal. I mean, obviously it was starting to wear me out. And why I did it, I think it was just because I do love it. I do genuinely love, hopefully, when you perform, you do feel like you've got a purpose and you see how it affects 100%. People. And so it's kind of your role within the realm of humans. But I think there was also this, it's interesting. Because it took me so long to get to a point where it was just until a few years ago, I thought it was all going to disappear. I had a friend that finally said, "You realize you're going to be able to do this as long as you want now."
Exactly.
Really?
So chill out. You don't have to chase this anymore, Miles.
Right.
And I think, so that was a lot of it. It was like, well, I got to keep going then, because this could all end tomorrow, and I'll end up in the "Where Are They Now" file, And it was just that, just keeping the blinders on and just thinking, the phone's going to stop ringing tomorrow, and just.
I think you got that drive. Sorry, you got that drive to succeed.
Yeah.
And you're succeeding, but you got the blinders on and you don't want to stop because you're just thinking of succeeding, but you got to take them off for a second and say, oh, maybe I have a little bit here and I can back down a second. Yeah.
Right. Well, then it becomes a problem because then it can be too much. It can kind of, you're out there too much. And that's something that I've really had to start thinking about, is how to be smart about, because, I'll never forget. It was actually at a conversation, and I won't say who the artist was, but it was with Pete Luzzi, and we were hanging out, I think down in South America, that maybe it was Argentina, and we were talking about someone who was coming through town, and there was a person that was with Pete, and she made the comment, and Pete was like, "Oh, cool, you're going to go see so-and-so," and she said, "Well, you can see so-and-so anytime because they're here so much," and I was like, "Ooh, I got to remember that." That's something I got to consider, because I do hit a lot of these markets a lot. So.
Yeah, but I think you hit them with three totally different things. You know what I mean? It's you, but your solo project is so different from, Alter Bridge, and Alter Bridge is so different from Slash. So yeah, but I totally get it. I think anybody that is super passionate about what they do get lost in, oh shit, the phone's not gonna ring anymore. I have to keep going. I know that I've been guilty of that in my own career as well.
Yeah. And I know we don't condone it, but we don't like, obviously the pandemic, people have died and gotten sick, and we feel terrible about that, but for sure. But people in our career, it's amazing how this forced break, we'll call it. Wow, man, I kind of maybe needed that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have done it on my own.
Absolutely. I think it's going to really shift a lot of people's priorities. It's going to be interesting after this is all over.
It is, isn't it? Sure is. It's going to definitely shift the priorities. It's going to be different coming back for sure. It's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
That is true. Here, Jessica Santiago asks, how has the music industry changed over your career? Do you feel like it's better or worse throughout your music career?
Wow.
Or just
love these questions.
Yeah, they're great.
I know,
yeah, it's
right?
definitely different. I mean, when I started, there was no such thing as, or at least not to the degree that it is now, as the internet. And, I think the internet, ultimately, it's changed everything. This streaming has changed everything. People don't buy records anymore. Look, here's the thing. When we all started, you basically toured to promote a record. So you'd make this thing called a record that people would buy and listen to, and you would tour in hopes that people would buy the record.
That's weird. Yeah,
it's weird, right? So now what happens is you make a record to basically promote a tour, because people aren't going to really buy the record. They're just going to know the record's out there. They can stream it on their phone, and then if they're interested and they like what you're making, they might show up when you play their city. And yeah, it's all just completely reversed.
The revenue streams have changed totally. Do you, and you've lived that, you started when records were making you money and now they don't. As an artist, is that revenue similar, or is it like, shit, man, artists don't make half of what they used to make?
Yeah, it's definitely not. If you're strictly a recording artist and you're not touring, you're good luck. Yeah. I mean, unless you're like Max Martin or these big time producers that had the streaming numbers are so off the charts, you got to get out there and tour. Is really the name of the game. So yeah, I mean, it's from a financial standpoint, it's way different than it was 30 years ago. Kind of is what it is, but you do it because you love it. And with that said, if you have a certain amount of success, you're still doing all right, and you're able to follow your bliss and make music and do what you love. I mean, you may not be driving a Bentley, but hey, you get to play music. I mean, that's awesome.
I equate it to kind of the early days of recording artists, right? Like Motown and stuff. They didn't make a whole lot of money and they loved what they did, but they were making a living at it. Then all of a sudden there was this heyday in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s a little bit of, making millions and buying Bentleys. And then now we're kind of back to Motown, but you know what? I feel, having said that, I know you feel this way too. It's like, we're super blessed to get to do something that we love. And as long as we can support our families doing it, then, I for myself, I don't need to be that multimillionaire, because every day I wake up and it's something that I love to do, at least pre-COVID anyway.
You think maybe, or are you doing it now, or maybe in the future, are you going to ever, I don't know, you might be doing it now. Are you going to write songs for somebody else?
Maybe someday. I would certainly entertain that. That would be fun. I do like collaborating too. So if time permits, and that could happen, where an artist is like, hey, I'd like to co-write with you, and I've done a little bit of that here and there. But where I don't live in Nashville or LA, I'm kind of far removed, being in Spokane. But the world's being brought closer with technology like this. So anything's possible.
Are you have you played on someone's record that hasn't been credited, or like a little ghost part that no one knows about, that it's you playing guitar or singing on? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, it used to happen. I mean, look, we didn't really talk about this on the first thing that we did, but one of the things I really wanted to be was a session player. I mean, I basically I was doing a fair amount of jingles and playing on.
Oh wow, cool.
Scores. I think I even played on I don't know if they ended up using it or not, but I think it was like a Wild War or what? No, it was a Monday Night Football thing. See, we had a lot of production houses here in Spokane, and we still might have a few that could basically do great work for not nearly as much money as what the LA guys were charging. So we started getting a lot of national stuff in the late 80s, and so those of us who kind of got in that scene would get called to play on these jingles or whatever. And I loved it. I loved doing session work, man. I mean, it's just because you never know what you're going to get, and it makes you really become versatile. And so yeah, I don't know.
Was there ever one that you were like, watching TV and you were like, hey, wait a minute.
I was like, hey, that's me on that.
Oh, that's so awesome.
That washing machine commercial, that's my guitar.
It's fantastic.
Oh, that's amazing, man.
Love it.
You got any more, Tater? We've taken a lot of Miles' time.
Yeah, no, I think we're pretty good here. We got everything, I think, pretty much wrapped up from the questions we had that came in.
Yep.
And it's MYLESKennedy.com, right? Just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
New singles out. New recordings coming out, right? March 14th, I think.
Is there anything that you can speak to about Alter Bridge or Slash? Are or those projects that are, obviously you're still working with them and writing with them and all that kind of stuff. But is there, people are going to want to know, is there stuff coming? What's happening?
Yeah, so as far as Alter Bridge goes, that's probably not going to be until next year at some point. I would assume later. With Slash and the Conspirators, lots of tunes. As far as demoing and writing and pre-pro and all that, well in the works. So
awesome.
Hopefully sooner than later.
Because people are, they're chomping at the bit, man. They want the new stuff.
And
right on.
Does Jason Hansen still live in Detroit, or did he move back to Spokane?
Last I saw him, he came to a show. We played at one of the theaters there, and he came. Yeah.
All right, maybe one of these days I'll meet the Detroit Lions leading scorer.
I could maybe get that to happen.
I mean, I think he was here 21 years, which is, for any football player, that's
huge.
Their careers last 3 years, not 21 years. So he had to live here for 21 years. So he probably has made this his home, but yeah.
I think he's there. Awesome. I think he likes it there.
Well, Myles, thank you again, dude, for your valuable time. We do this thing selfishly so that we can catch up with our friends, and it's been too long. And thanks for spending some time with us.
My pleasure, man. I really enjoyed it. Miss you guys a ton.
Right on, man. We miss you too.
Hopefully soon.
All right, guys, take care. That's it for Wrong End of the Snake. Next week, don't forget about Smoother. Come check it out. All right, see you guys.
Right on.